interrupt this program to bring you Courage, the Cowardly Dog Month.
Whole month of Courage, the Cowardly Dog. First appearing in 1996, it was picked up by Cartoon Network, who work in the middle of Burbank, and directed by cartoonist John Dilworth. Though many years have passed since the original air date, it's now time for Zack Morris to celebrate this great show.
Well, old sport, what do you think? Neat. Hey guys, Zack Morris here, and welcome back to Courage Month. So today's episodes we're going to be reviewing are Cabaret Courage and Wrath of the Librarian. So let's get into both of those. Okay, so this first episode, Cabaret Courage, is where they actually wind up in a cabaret, but there's an interesting twist to that whole premise, and I'll get to that in a minute. But in any case, the episode opens up with Eustace, Courage, and Muriel actually going to visit Hollowood, or at least their in-universe version of Hollowood, not more actually referred to as Horrorwood in the actual episode. And also something interesting is that apparently Benson Tarantella, he has his own Walk of Fame star in here. I kid you not, it's like one of the first things we see in this episode. But in any case, Muriel is just kind of admiring all the different people that have been on the Walk of Fame, and even admiring a person called Lenora, who is an actress that Muriel actually takes a liking to, and actually has a very similar hand size to. And also, Courage actually tries to compare his hands to that of a famous dog, but I forget what the name of the dog is. But in any case, his hands don't quite fit, and Eustace just kind of laughs at him because his hands don't fit. But then D-Long actually shoves past Eustace, and actually in the process winds up dropping all of his headshots all over the place. With him saying his catchphrase of "Watch where you're going, you fool," and telling Eustace that he'll make some calls and that Eustace will never actually work in that town again. But Eustace just kind of blows him off and calls him a lousy hippie and decides that they should probably leave. And Eustace actually does wind up taking them in the direction of a sidewalk, with Muriel merely remarking how beautiful the city actually is. And while Eustace doesn't really want to take in the beauty of it, Muriel merely remarks that they're in the center of where all the movie stars live and are made. So she even tells them all to actually take it in, and then as they're actually walking on the sidewalk, the sewer system actually opens up, and the two of them actually wind up falling in, with Courage actually screaming because he just saw his owners fall down a hole, and then D-Long kicks him in shortly afterward because it's D-Long. He sucks. But in case Eustace, Muriel, and later Courage actually wind up falling down, and an intestinal lining looking thing, an intestinal lining looking hole in the ground, and they eventually wind up in a giant cabaret club, but with a unique twist to it, in that the cabaret is actually covered in intestinal walls, which is weird and which is very weird, and Muriel and Eustace even remark that it does look a little bit strange, and Courage has no idea what's going on. But then they actually are introduced to the host of the area, who is actually a giant ulcer in the pit of a stomach. So yeah, the ulcer actually offers them a place in the cabaret club, and actually thanks them for dropping in, quite literally, and actually tells them that they're welcome to be there, and even tells them that they're actually going to be a very big special performance, and Eustace merely asks him what the cover charge is, but the ulcer really responds that there is no cover charge. So Eustace begins to sit down, at which point the ulcer remarks that the bags are actually going to be performing for his entertainment, which Eustace then takes offense to, pointing out that he isn't a performer, and there's no way in hell he's actually singing for anything. So yeah, in any case, the ulcer then proceeds to offer Eustace a solid gold truck for his efforts. So Eustace decides to actually give it a shot, and actually goes up on the stage with the spotlight following him, and he proceeds to kind of down the river. He actually sings his own variation of "Down by the River," but with his own lyrics, and also he can't sing, so he winds up being dropped down a trapdoor. With Muriel merely remarking that Eustace never really was that good a singer, but But in any case, he also then offers Muriel a spot to actually sing on the stage, which Muriel initially turns down, pointing out that she did perform a little bit when she was very younger, but that was many years ago, and she's old now. So obviously she hasn't sung in years. Although she can play a little bit, but she hasn't sung in years. But in any case, they also then proceeds to offer her fame and fortune. Pointing out that if she does this, she'll actually be as famous as Lenora, which Muriel has been established to be a big fan of. So obviously she immediately jumps at the opportunity and asks Courage to play a backing track for her. And actually asks him to play a note so that she can actually tune herself. Which Courage then proceeds to take the opportunity, then just kind of starts showing off a little bit, and actually starts playing the piano instead of actually giving her a note, but which Muriel merely tells him to stop showing off since this is her time to shine, and that he's upstaging her, and then proceeds to start singing her own song, which results in her getting dropped down, and at which point the ulcer proceeds to offer Courage an opportunity to sing, and Courage merely demands to know what happened to his owners, and the ulcer merely responds that they gave him heartburn, so they disappeared. And then proceeds to offer Courage some things to actually get him to perform. First offering him the finest steak that he can offer, which Courage does wind up drooling himself over, but refuses, saying that he actually wants his family back. But the ulcer then proceeds to follow up his own original offer by offering Courage some handmade artisan shoes, which Courage once again drools over at the thought of actually chewing those up. But he once again decides that he wants his family back, so he also merely proceeds to point out all of the things that it believes about itself, about how anybody can be bought and how anybody will throw themselves away for fame and fortune. And merely tells Courage that it's only a matter of time before Courage will actually find his price. So Courage then proceeds to actually decides that he'll actually will take the ulcer up on his offer, and proceeds to dress himself up in a Tarzan outfit, and proceeds to start swinging around the place, which the ulcer does seem to find rather enjoyable. But and Courage does start swinging around from the intestine to intestine, but he eventually winds up falling off and winds up crashing through the floor on top of the the piano, which then proceeds to go through the floor with him, and he winds up landing underneath the stage, which is revealed to be a pool of stomach acid. And also just reiterates his previous point about how he finds people who give up fame who take on fame and fortune just to become rich and famous. For that reason and on that reason alone, he points out that the people's self-interest actually disgusts him, and that is why he kind of digests anybody who actually comes through his cabaret club. But in any case, since Courage is currently floating on a piano of stomach acid, he proceeds to actually pull Muriel to safety, whose legs are a little badly burned, but otherwise she's fine. And also to a lesser extent Eustace, who has lost all of his legs except for his bones, but he's still fine as well. He can still walk and talk just fine. But in any case, once Eustace is actually pulled onto the piano, it actually starts to break up. So Courage has to actually throw his owners to safety out of the pit, and then he follows them shortly after once he actually winds up collapsing into stomach acid, and he winds up shooting out and running face first into the ulcer. And the ulcer is actually winds up admiring Courage for that, pointing out that realizing now that Courage wasn't lying and that all he wanted was his family back, and is impressed by how selfless Courage actually is, and is so helpless that she is so moved by Courage's selflessness that he actually winds up having a heart attack. I kid you not, he actually starts dying right on the spot. And Muriel points out that he actually may need some help, and tells Courage that they'll actually need to help him out, much to Courage's chagrin, since obviously he just wants to leave with his family while he still can. But then the ulcer winds up pointing them in the direction of his heart, which is in the center of the room underneath the glass floor. So Courage winds up breaking through the glass floor, and using cartoon physics, eventually manages to start the man's heart. So which does cause the ulcer to actually come back to life, and he's actually very moved with joy because Courage not only saved his owner selflessly, but also did so for himself. And with that, he's actually so moved that he actually winds up turning back into what he used to be before he was an ulcer. Because of this, the intestinal linings of the Cabaret Club actually wind up receding and going back inside of the ulcer, and Muriel merely remarks that he seems to just be transforming back into whatever he was before he became an ulcer, and eventually he does wind up transforming back and transforms into a bald man in a nice suit. At which point he reveals his backstory about how he used to be a very optimistic young man, but he wound up seeing so many people throw themselves away for fame and fortune that he wound up becoming increasingly cynical as a result, and eventually he became an ulcer in his own stomach, which isn't how that works, but it's Courage the Cowardly Dog in a cartoon, so we'll allow it. But he then asks them how he could ever repay them for actually saving him. Muriel remarks that she wouldn't mind finishing her musical number. So the man that used to be an ulcer actually allows it, and she winds up going on stage to perform in front of everybody, much to Eustace's chagrin, who just fills his ears with corks and proceeds to just kind of tune her out. So at which point she begins to start her musical number, but then D-Lung interrupts her and starts his own musical number. And if you thought Eustace couldn't sing, you'd be right. But D-Lung is infinitely worse than Eustace is, and he winds up getting dropped down the trapdoor as a result of that. So yeah, D-Lung kind of deserved that, I think. It's D-Lung. He's done some terrible things he probably shouldn't be proud of, but yeah, the D-Lung winds up being... So yeah, this episode is just kind of about the ideas of fame and fortune. Obviously, the guy got increasingly cynical because he saw people just throwing themselves away for fame and fortune, and he eventually became an ulcer. Which doesn't make any goddamn sense, but okay. But the episode is just so much about the fact that fame and fortune often changes people. That is just the long and short of it, because Eustace and Muriel didn't want to perform, but then they were offered fame, fortune, money, and a whole bunch of other things, and they eventually wound up selling out and trying to perform for the ulcer, which backfired horribly. And it was only Courage was like the exception to the rule in that case, because he saved these owners by just being the selfless hero that he's been up throughout most of the series. He's just been completely selfless in his acts, and he wanted to proving the ulcer wrong, that there are people who can just do things that are the kindness of their own heart and don't need fame or fortune to do any of those things. And that's ultimately what caused the ulcer to turn back to normal. But in any case, that's my review of Cabaret Courage. On to the next review. Okay, so this episode is kind of interesting in that the premise is actually pretty straightforward, but it adds its own twist of Courage the Cowardly Dogness to it, which is which the premise is this: Courage is actually digging through one of his usual digging spots to find some stuff that he may have forgotten, and he eventually actually winds up uncovering an old library book that he apparently never returned. So the book itself is called The Pixie and the Prickle Pirate, which Courage apparently rented from a library many years ago. And Muriel comes out and sees that Courage has the library book and realizes that realizing Courage never actually returned it, and also pointing out that it is now 2 years overdue. She merely urges him to go and return it and bring it back. Courage immediately goes and tracks down the library, which is apparently mobile in nowhere. Apparently, it's in its own little book kiosk and actually moves around. But in any case, Courage winds up bringing it back to the librarian, who doesn't speak at all. Her only word in the entire episode is shush. That is her entire thing. She shushes people rather than speaking. But in any case, Courage then proceeds to present her the library book, and the librarian gladly accepts it. But then she winds up calculating the late fees, and it's nearly $4,000 in late fees. So, which Courage obviously does not have the money to pay. He rifles through his pockets and pulls out a bunch of other things, but barely has any money to actually pay for the whole situation in the first place, and he can't actually pay off the library fee. So, but the librarian merely points at the sign again, but he's forced to just leave. At which point, the lions in front of her library actually come to life, and tell Courage that if he doesn't pay what he owes, then that he'll just keep owing and owing. But in any case, Courage then proceeds to run as far from the library as he can and back to the back farmhouse. But the librarian isn't done with him and actually winds up putting a curse on the book. And then when Courage gets back to the farmhouse, it's waiting for him on the front porch, which Courage understandably freaks out over. So he winds up picking up the library book and bringing it inside and actually trying to figure out a way he can actually pay for the overdue library book. And Muriel actually tries to help. She actually brings her life savings, which she remarks isn't much. It's only like a few dollars and some change. But she hopes that it'll at the very least help Courage pay it off. But Eustace merely snatches the money from her, and pointing out that if he wants to pay off the library book, that he'll have to earn the money himself. And then proceeds to add the money to his stash inside of his chair, which apparently he has. We've established this. Eustace is very greedy. He's a very greedy person, but apparently he just hoards whatever money he has, and puts it in his chair and then sits on it like a dragon. So, yeah, that's kind of funny. I do like that idea for an episode, but I do like that idea for a premise, and I'm wondering how long he's had that stash in there. Presumably forever. Presumably for a very long time he's had that stash in there. But in any case, Muriel tells Eustace that they should probably help him out. Since obviously Courage is in way over his head, and he's definitely going to need any help he can get. But Eustace merely scoffs the idea, pointing out that he's just gonna go back to watching TV, pointing out that unlike the library books, TV is free according to Eustace, which is a straight up lie to anyone who's ever bought cable or anything else. You know that you have to pay somebody to actually get cable. I'm assuming Eustace has since only gets free cable because of his satellite, but still, normally you have to pay for cable or for cable TV. So I mean, it's a satellite TV, so it's probably fine. But he does remark that TV is free, which I should point out may or may not be true for satellite TV, since I never used satellite TV. But nowadays it's a straight up lie. Nowadays you don't have to pay. You have to actually pay money for your TV. But in any case, Muriel then remarks with that little explanation of how TV works out of the way. Muriel merely takes the book from Courage, responding that if they're going to have the book, they might as well read it. And she opens the book to actually go and read it, but winds up getting a paper cut. And then Eustace tries to take the book from her, pointing out that TV wouldn't give anybody a paper cut, but then he winds up getting a paper cut as well. And it's at this point where the book starts whispering that if you don't pay what you owe, you'll just keep owing and owing. And at that point, the book then proceeds to flip back to its first page. And very ominously, my ad, Courage actually freaks out a little bit because the book is moving on its own. But then Eustace and Muriel actually start changing. What happens is it starts with Eustace first, but what happens is Muriel winds up becoming the fairy from the pixie, and Eustace winds up becoming the prickle pirate. So yeah, they wind up transforming into the main characters from the book. And as far as I can tell, we don't actually know what the contents of the book actually entail. We never actually get to read the book, but from what I can tell, they're actually reciting lines from the book and are actually repeating it verbatim. So, which is very creepy and a little terrifying. And Courage just watches slack-jawed in awe. He has no idea how to actually respond to any of this. He does freak out a little bit because his owners have turned into characters from his library book, but he doesn't really know how to respond. He just sits there and watches, and a whole bunch of cartoon faces happen. But he just sits there and watches in utter surprise and fear. He's unable to move. But in case the pixie and the prickle pirate actually start fighting inside the living room and start tearing things up and destroying everything, and eventually Pixie Muriel winds up fleeing into the kitchen, with the prickle pirate just trying to free himself from the banister because his giant hook thing stuck. At which point Courage puts on a rubber glove and actually picks up the book and actually follows Muriel into the kitchen, where Muriel seems to think that he's her sidekick, and from the book, and calls him a fairy friend, and flies, and actually winds up flying out the window. And then Prickle Pirate apparently recognizes Courage as his sidekick as well, and then asks him to follow him after the pixie, and proceeds to jump out the window as well, and they run off into the middle of town. And also, I should mention they actually do wind up follow. They actually do wind up. Courage actually does wind up following them into the center of town, where their performance is actually, where their quote unquote performance is actually started to gather attention from all of the people, nearby people. It has actually started to gather attention from all of the people in nowhere who think it's an act and don't really actually realize that Eustace and Muriel actually think they are Pixie and Prickle Pirate. They just think it's an act. And also throughout this entire episode, you just got messages, subliminal messages hidden in the episode that just go, return the book, read a book. They're just everywhere in this episode after this point. So yeah, in any case, Courage then proceeds to actually try and climb up the movie theater, because Muriel is actually dancing around on top of the awning for the movie theater. Is actually putting on performance while Eustace is shooting cannonballs at her with a cannon. So Courage actually winds up climbing on top and actually getting her to safety, and actually winds up in the process. He actually winds up freeing her, but he actually also winds up flying face first into a telephone pole and winds up getting very badly injured as a result. With the pixie merely telling Courage that they can already fly, and that was unnecessary, and then she proceeds to bound off. Meanwhile, Courage is following Pixie Muriel to try and figure out to try and get her to come back. And in the process, he actually passes Dr. Vindaloo, who is putting up a missing poster for his elephant that apparently disappeared at some point, and currently Dr. Vindaloo is trying to find it. So he puts up a missing poster, and Courage actually talks to him, telling him what's going on, and Dr. Vindaloo points out that he's not entirely sure what's going on, but he'll see what he can do, and actually winds up following Muriel up the tree where she is, and it winds up getting caught up in her antics, I should mention, which is kind of funny. But in case, quote unquote, Prickle Pirate actually shows up and tells Courage that they actually need to take to the high seas to actually follow the pixie. And eventually realizes that actually sees the little ice cream carts that get pushed around, and Eustace remarks that that's his ship, and then picks up Courage and tells him to go get it. So he winds up hitting the guy in the back of the head, and Eustace winds up climbing on top of the he winds up climbing on top of the ice cream truck, and Courage winds up pedaling it into around, and he hits a bump, and Prickle Pirate winds up falling off, and Courage winds up ramming it into the tree where Dr. Vindaloo and the pixie are actually dancing around, and Dr. Vindaloo merely remarks after seeing Courage that that Courage was right and that he has indeed lost it. She has indeed lost it, but there's nothing he can do, and then he proceeds to bounce off like the little pixie that he is. At which point, Courage realizes that the only thing he can actually do to actually solve the situation is to return the library book and pay off the fine. So he winds up bringing it back to the librarian. But by this point, the librarian only merely points to the sign and reveals that it's now nearly $7,000 that Courage needs to pay for his fine. Courage still doesn't have any money, and he realizes he has no idea of how he's actually going to pay off the library book, since he realizes now that that's the only way he's going to get Eustace and Muriel to turn back to normal. But eventually he gets an idea, which is that he remembers that Eustace and Muriel have actually gathered a crowd throughout this episode and have been watching the antics of Pixie and Prickle Pirate in the middle of the streets. So Courage gets a great idea to grab a curtain from the theater and proceeds to monetize the whole thing. I kid you not, he takes a curtain, puts it over the electrical wire that Pixie and Prickle Pirate are currently playing on and trying to fight, and he forces everybody to charge money. So he charges everybody money so that they're forced to actually watch the show, because they can't watch it for free anymore. Which they all grumble about, but they do wind up paying Courage. So Courage winds up coming back with a stack of money, and hands it to the librarian. But the librarian actually does something a little bit shady here, which is that Courage actually winds up paying the fine off in full. I should mention this. But in the 5 minutes he's been gone, the librarian has jacked up the price to like nearly $400 million, which Courage does point out is a little bit bullshit. He does point that out. He complains very adamantly about the fact that she's basically robbing him, and that she's charging way too much money for a book fine. Yes, Courage has to pay off the fine, but she just kind of stakes it up to ludicrous prices, and Courage isn't having any of it. And he even starts slamming the book on her kiosk to get her to, and remarks and tries to like punish her for raising the price so high. But this winds up lowering the price somehow because it winds up changing the sign. So which winds up being $10 million and 1 cent. And Courage winds up fishing through, realizing he has just enough money to actually pay off the fine. Fishes around for that one last coin. He checks his pockets first and foremost, but he doesn't have any. But he doesn't have a coin, and then he discovers that he actually stepped in some gum in a crosswalk and actually picked up a coin that way. So he uses that to pay off his fine, which winds up paying off the fine in full. And the lions merely remark that he has finally paid what he's owed, and the librarian stamps it as returned. So at which point, Eustace and Muriel actually wind up turning back to their usual selves. They're actually in an enclosure at the zoo. They actually wind up in the snake enclosure by accident, and in the process, when they turn back, Eustace winds up getting bitten by the snake, and his clothes get ripped, and he runs back to the farmhouse presumably. But he winds up being they both wind up being saved as a result of that, and Eustace and Courage actually wind up but Muriel and Courage actually wind up embracing because now she's back to normal, and the librarian pops out of the snake's mouth and shushes the audience one last time, and then the episode ends in abject silence. That is how the episode ends, and it makes perfect sense. The music just immediately cuts out. There's no noise. It's just the end title in complete abject silence, which I kind of like. But yeah, this episode is just this is just an important lesson to teach kids. Return everything you're owed. Return your library books. Don't forget. That is the thing that this episode definitely sets up. Don't forget to return what you owe and pay what you owe. Especially if you're bringing back a library book, because yes, there's some supernatural stuff going on in this episode, but the overall premise of this episode is return your library books and make sure you pay off your fees. That is what the episode is. There's literally nothing else I can say about that. Just pay off your debts, pay off the library book, and go on your merry way. I mean, yes, you can get a little bit over your head, but it is important to just remember to return your library books, because sometimes people forget and they wind up owing lots and lots and lots of money. And it's just an important lesson. It's just the important lesson of this episode. Just pay back your debts. But in any case, yeah, that's gonna do it for my review of Courage the Cowardly Dog. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the channel, then Twitter is actually the best way to do that. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well if you want to help support me. Obviously, this was a very big project to carry out the year, and I'm almost done with it, I should mention. Tomorrow is like the last day of Courage Month, and then we're going to be doing the movie review. So, and also the live watch-along of the movie. So, if you want to absolutely see that, by all means, link is down in the description. Do not miss that. That is important. But in any case, yeah, just go check that out. Go check out my Discord, link is down in the description. And also, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. First above is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. And also, be sure to check out my Twitch as well, because I'm trying to fulfill a milestone, and also I stream every Sunday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, schedule permitting. We were also originally going to do the watch along on that, but Twitch is dumb and doesn't let you watch pay to rent movies, so or even if you own the movie, they don't let you watch it. So yeah, we're not doing that over there anymore. We're doing it on Discord. Again, do not forget that. Be sure to go check that out. Link is down in the description. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Please follow me please follow my Discord so that you can actually see the movie along with me. But in any case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.